My sister's wedding cost $100,000. I know because I'm the one who paid for it. I just didn't know it at the time. The ceremony was at Cabarrus Country Club, July 19th. Outdoor pavilion, 150 guests on white folding chairs, arranged in perfect rows across a lawn that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly rent. Champagne tower in the ballroom. String quartet by the Rose Arch. My father stood at the head table with a microphone. Champagne glass, raised, grinning like a man who'd pulled off the con of a lifetime. And he had to Naomi and Jordan. He said, "This is the best wedding gift we ever gave." The room clapped. I didn't. I was sitting at table 7 with my boyfriend Marcus, wearing a $40 navy dress from TJ Maxx and my grandmother's pearl earrings. And I smiled at my father across the room and said it quietly, "Check your mailbox." His face went white. 24 hours later, my parents would find a foreclosure notice in their mailbox and discover that the daughter they stole from was the only reason they still had a house. Welcome back to Family Payback Files. I'm Willa Mercer. I'm 29. I'm a paralegal at a real estate law firm in Concord, North Carolina. My parents sold the apartment my grandmother left me to pay for my sister's $100,000 wedding. They never told me, and they never knew I'd been paying their mortgage for 4 years. I've worked at Chambers and Hale Real Estate Law for 6 years. Started at 23, fresh out of the paralegal program at Central Piedmont, answering phones and filing deed transfers. By 25, I was running title searches. By 27, Diane Chambers, senior partner, 61, the kind of woman who wears reading glasses on a chain and calls everyone hon. Let me handle closing solo. I sit across the table from buyers and sellers and mortgage brokers, and I make sure every line on every document is correct before anyone signs. Title searches, lien disputes, easement conflicts. I've caught forged signatures, missing heirs, undisclosed second mortgages, and one spectacular case where a man tried to sell a house he'd lost in a divorce 7 years earlier. I catch things for a living. That's what makes this story so hard to tell, because I didn't catch the one thing that mattered most. My grandmother, Cora Mercer, bought a 2-bedroom condo at 312 Poplar Ridge Drive in Concord in 2005, paid it off by 2015. When she died in 2022 at 82, her will was clear. The condo goes to Willa. I moved in 3 months after the funeral, repainted every room, replaced the kitchen faucet, paid the HOA, the property taxes, the insurance. Marcus Holloway, 31, electrician, self-employed, the kind of man who shows up at midnight to fix your breaker panel and doesn't say a word about it. Marcus upgraded the electrical panel and installed new outlets in every room. We made it ours. Cora's china cabinet stayed in the dining nook. Her photo stayed on the mantle. I never ran a title search on my own condo. In my line of work, trust is a title defect. I should have known better. My father, Glenn Mercer, is 58. He was a maintenance supervisor at Cabarrus Textiles for 28 years. He could fix anything. Industrial looms, HVAC units, the hydraulic press on the 3rd floor that nobody else would touch. Employee of the Year plaque hung in his garage. He lost that job 4 years ago when the plant downsized, and he hasn't been the same since. Odd jobs now. A fence here, a deck stain there. He won't ask for help. He'll borrow from a credit card at 22%. Before he'll let his daughters see him struggle. My mother, Patrice, is 56. She's worked the cafeteria line at Concord Middle School for 18 years. Hairnet, serving spoon, lunch trays. She grew up in a trailer park in Albemarle. Her father left when she was 11. Her mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford the electric bill in August. Patrice's prom dress came from Goodwill. She married my father at 21 and swore on everything she had that her daughters would never know what it felt like to go without. Then there's Naomi, my sister, 24, assistant manager at J. Crew in South Park Mall, Charlotte, engaged to Jordan Whitfield, 26, IT support at a hospital system. Naomi is sweet. She's genuine. She calls mom every single day. She is also the baby. And in our family, that means something specific. Naomi is the one who needs us. And Willa is the one who's fine. My grandmother Ka was the only person who saw it differently. She was a retired schoolteacher, sharp until the end. She told me once, sitting in that condo on Poplar Ridge, drinking sweet tea from a mason jar, "You're the one who will take care of things after I'm gone, Willa, so I'm making sure you have something of your own." Glenn Mercer was not a bad man. I need you to understand that because it matters for what comes later. He was a man who built his entire identity around one thing, providing 28 years at Cabarrus Textiles, never missed a shift, never called in sick, brought home a steady paycheck every 2 weeks, and handed it to Patrice and said, "We're covered." That was his sentence, his whole theology. We're covered. Then the plant downsized in 2021. Glenn was 54. They gave him a severance check and a handshake and 30 minutes to clean out his locker. Unemployment lasted 6 months. He applied to every maintenance job in Cabarrus County. Too old, overqualified, wrong certifications. The rejections stacked up on the kitchen counter next to the bills he was starting to ignore. He opened a credit card, then another, then a third. 15,000 became 25. 25 became 40. He didn't tell Patrice. She was still packing lunch trays at the middle school, still believing they were covered. The mortgage started falling behind. He called the bank once, got a 3-month forbearance, and convinced himself the problem was solved. It wasn't. Past due notices arrived. He put them in a drawer. When Ka died and left the condo to me, Glenn didn't see a granddaughter's inheritance. He saw a family asset. He told himself Mama would have wanted them to use it. He told himself the will was just a guideline. He told himself the deed was never transferred, so technically it still belonged to the estate. And he was the executive. And executives make decisions. Every lie was small enough to swallow. That's how decent men do terrible things. Not in one dramatic act, but in 100 tiny rationalizations. Each one just plausible enough to let them sleep. Patrice Mercer grew up hungry. Not the kind of hungry people post about online. The real kind, where dinner is whatever's in the cabinet, and sometimes the cabinet is empty. Her trailer in Albemarle had a hole in the bathroom floor you could see the ground through. Her mother worked mornings at a dry cleaner and nights at a gas station, and still couldn't keep the lights on in August. Patrice wore the same 3 outfits to school. She knew what the other kids said about her. She married Glenn at 21 because he was steady. He had a job. He had a job. He had a truck that started every morning. He looked at her like she was worth something, and nobody had ever done that before. She made 2 promises the day she got married. First, her daughters would never wear Goodwill prom dresses. Second, when her girls got married, it would be beautiful. Not a courthouse, not a backyard barbecue. Beautiful. The kind of wedding that proves you made it. When Naomi got engaged at Christmas, Jordan on one knee, the ring, the tears, the whole production, Patrice saw the finish line. 35 years of cafeteria trays and coupon clipping and saying no to herself so she could say yes to her girls. And here it was, the wedding, her moment as much as Naomi's. She started planning before the champagne went flat. Venue Cabarrus Country Club, flowers, peas, and ranunculus. Dress bridal boutique in Charlotte, budget $100,000. She asked Glenn once, "How are we paying for this?" Glenn said, "I found a way." She didn't ask what way. She didn't ask where the money came from. She didn't want to know, because knowing might mean the wedding couldn't happen. And the wedding had to happen. The wedding was proof she'd escaped the trailer park. She couldn't afford to question it. Here's the part nobody knew. It was October 2021. I drove over to my parents' house on Branchview Drive in Canopolis on a Saturday morning to drop off groceries. Glenn and Patrice were at church. I let myself in with the spare key under the ceramic frog on the porch. Same frog since I was 12. And I set the bags on the kitchen counter. That's when I saw the notices. 2 envelopes from Cabarrus Federal Credit Union. Past due stamped in red across both. I opened them. Mortgage, 2 months behind. Total owed a $1,900 plus late fees. I stood in my parents' kitchen holding those envelopes and I did the math. Glenn lost his job 5 months ago. Unemployment pays 60%. Mortgage is $950 a month. He was drowning. I didn't confront him. I didn't call. I drove home, sat down at my laptop and set up an automatic payment, $950 a month from my checking account to Cabarrus Federal Credit Union, reference Glenn Mercer account ending 4471. 2 months later, I added the homeowner's insurance, $210 a month, total $1,160 a month, total $1,160. Every month, almost a quarter of my take-home pay as a paralegal at Chambers in Hale. I told Marcus. He sat on my couch, looked at me for a long time and said, "Your money, your call." I didn't tell Glenn. I didn't tell Patrice. Glenn called the bank once, a few months later, was told his account was current, and assumed the forbearance had worked itself out. He never questioned it. Patrice never knew there was a problem in the first place. 4 years, 48 months, $55,680. I paid every cent, and my parents had no idea I existed on their mortgage statement. Jordan proposed at Christmas dinner 2024. He had asked Glenn's permission 2 weeks earlier. Glenn said yes before Jordan finished the sentence, which should have told me something about how badly my father wanted a win. Jordan knelt by the tree. Naomi cried. Patrice cried harder. Glenn shook Jordan's hand, like a man closing a deal. I hugged my sister and meant it. Naomi and I aren't adversaries, we never were. She's 5 years younger. She used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. She still texts me photos of outfits before work and asks which earrings go better. I love her. That's what makes all of this worse. The planning started before New Year's. Patrice was on the phone with venues by December 28th. She had spreadsheets, she had Pinterest boards, she had a vision. Kibari's Country Club, $15,000 deposit. Bridal gown from a boutique on Providence Road in Charlotte, $4,500. Flowers $8,000. Photographer $6,000. Catering $22,000 for 150 guests. Band $5,000. Invitations, rentals, linens, cake, favors, hotel room blocks, the rehearsal dinner, 100 other line items that added up to another $40,000. Grand total, $100,000. I sat at my parents' dining table in January watching my mother add numbers on her phone calculator, tapping the screen with her index finger like she was counting gold coins. And I said, 100,000, Mom. Where's that coming from? Patrice waved her hand. Your father is handling it. Glenn nodded from the other end of the table. He didn't make eye contact with me. I looked at my father, the man whose mortgage I had been secretly paying for 3 years. And I felt something shift beneath me. Not suspicion, not yet. Just the faintest crack in a floor I'd been standing on for a long time. The winter before everything fell apart was the best season of my life, and I didn't know it. The condo on Popular Ridge was mine in every way that mattered, or so I thought. I'd repainted the bedroom a soft gray. Marcus had rewired the whole kitchen. Cora's china cabinet stood in the dining nook, full of her wedding china that nobody ever used but nobody would ever throw away. Her photo sat on the mantel in a brass frame. Cora at 70, standing in front of that condo the day she paid off the mortgage, holding the paid in full letter like a diploma. Diane Chambers called me into her office in February. Closed the door, took off her reading glasses, and let them hang on the chain. Willa, I want to put you on partnership track. You'd be the first paralegal in this firm to run closings independently. Senior paralegal. I said I'd think about it. I went home and ran numbers. If I made senior paralegal, the raise would cover Marcus and me if we decided to buy a house together. We talked about it. Maybe sell the condo. No mortgage on it. Cora paid that off years ago. Used the equity as a down payment on something with a yard. The condo was worth about $185,000. That was my nest egg, my only real asset. Everything I had that wasn't a paycheck or a checking account balance. I sat on the couch that night with Marcus and a calculator and a bottle of wine, and we mapped out a future. Sell the condo, put $60,000 down, get a 3-bedroom off Pitt School Road. Maybe start talking about the things couples talk about when they have a 3-bedroom and a yard. I fell asleep that night with my head on Marcus's shoulder. Rich in the only way that mattered. I had a plan. Plans are what happened before the letter arrives. The letter came on a Saturday in March. I was on the porch with coffee, barefoot, still in the sweatshirt I'd slept in. White envelope, return address. Kazik and Associates, attorneys, at law, Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't recognize the firm. Inside was a single page typed polite in the way lawyers are polite when they're telling you something terrible. Dear occupant, pursuant to the recent sale of Unit 4B, 312, Popular Ridge Drive, Concord, North Carolina, we are writing on behalf of the new owners, David and Kim Park, to request that all current occupants vacate the premises within 30 days. I read it twice on the porch, then I went inside and read it again at the kitchen table. Recent sale. My condo had been sold. I opened the county recorder website on my phone. I know the URL by heart. I use it 40 times a week. And pulled the deed records for 312 Popular Ridge Drive, Unit 4B. The chain of title loaded in seconds. 2005, Cora Mercer purchases property. Mortgage satisfied. 2015. 2022. Cora Mercer deceased. Will filed with Cabarrus County Probate Court. Executive Glenn Mercer, 2022 through 2025. No deed transfer recorded to Willa Mercer. Title remains in estate of Cora Mercer. March 2025. Deed transfer from estate of Cora Mercer to David and Kim Park. Instrument signed by Glenn Mercer, Executive. Sale price $185,000. I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table in my grandmother's condo, staring at my phone, and I read my father's name on a deed that should have had mine. He sold it 6 weeks ago. Closing was in January. He'd been sitting across the dinner table from me, nodding while Patrice talked about wedding budgets, and he'd already signed the papers. He sold my home. He told me nothing. I drove to Branchview Drive with the letter on the passenger seat. Didn't call ahead, didn't need to. Glenn was in the garage with the door up, sitting on a stool next to his workbench, doing nothing. The Employee of the Year plaque hung on the wall behind him. He looked up when I pulled in. He knew. I could see it on his face. The look of a man who'd been waiting for this car to pull into this driveway for 6 weeks. You sold my apartment, Dad. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He sat down the coffee mug he was holding and said, "It wasn't your apartment, Willa. It was Mama's, and she left it to the family. She left it to me." The will says, "To my granddaughter, Willa." I read it. "I filed the probate paperwork for you. The deed was never transferred. Legally, title remained with the estate. And as executor, I know what legally means, Dad. I do this for a living. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 years. His mouth opened and closed. The look on his face was specific. A man caught using his daughter's own expertise as a weapon against her, and realizing mid-swing that she built the weapon. "The wedding," he said. "Naomi's wedding. We needed. You sold my home. The home Grandma left me for a party. It's not a party. It's your sister's wedding. And where am I supposed to live?" Glenn had no answer. He picked up his coffee mug, set it down again. The garage was quiet. The plaque on the wall said Glenn Mercer, Employee of the Year. Cabarrus Textiles 2018. 3 years before they let him go. Everything my father was proud of had an expiration date, including apparently his integrity. I found Patrice in the kitchen. She was peeling potatoes at the sink. And when I walked in, she turned with a paring, knife in one hand and a half-pelled Yukon Gold in the other, and the expression on her face told me everything I needed to know. She knew. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. "Did you know Dad sold my condo?" She set the potato down carefully. "He said he found a way to cover the wedding. He found a way. He sold my home, Mom, the one Grandma left me. Willa, this wedding is going to be the most beautiful day of your sister's. It was Grandma's condo. She left it to me in her will. She paid it off. She wanted me to have it. And Dad sold it for $185,000, without telling me." Patrice dried her hands on a dish towel. She folded it twice and set it on the counter with the deliberate precision of a woman buying time. Then she said what I knew she'd say. "You have Marcus. You have your job. You have your whole career. Naomi needed this." There it was. The family arithmetic. Willa has things so we can take from Willa. Naomi needs things so we can take from Willa. Naomi needs things so we give to Naomi. The independent daughter is a savings account the family draws from without asking. The baby is a project the family invests in without questioning. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I'm a paralegal. I don't slam doors. I file motions. I document evidence. I build cases. And I was building one right now. I just hadn't told anyone yet. I walked out of my parents' kitchen and drove back to the condo I had 28 days left in. Patrice didn't follow me. She went back to peeling potatoes. Back at the condo, Cora's couch. Cora's photo on the mantle. 28 days. And this would all belong to David and Kim Park, 2 strangers who paid my father $185,000 for the home my grandmother left to me. I picked up my phone, opened my banking app. There it was. Automatic payment. Cabarrus Federal Credit Union, Glenn Mercer Mortgage, $950. Next payment scheduled April 1st. Below. It. Automatic payment NC Farm Bureau Homeowners Insurance. Glenn Mercer Policy $210. Next payment scheduled April 15th. 4 years, 48 payments of $950. 46 payments of $210.55, $680.55. I paid more into my parents' house than they had since Glenn lost his job and they had sold mine. I hovered my thumb over the cancel button, didn't press it, stared at the screen. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. That's why I like numbers. They don't rationalize. They don't say, Naomi needed this. They don't look away when you catch them. Numbers just sit there, honest and cold. Marcus came in. He'd been in his truck giving me space. He saw my face and sat down next to me on the couch without a word. That's Marcus. An electrician reads a room the way he reads a circuit. Looking for where the current is? Where it isn't, and what's about to blow. What are you going to do? He asked. What I should have done 4 years ago. I pressed cancel on the mortgage. Confirmed. I pressed cancel on the insurance. Confirmed. Done. Marcus sat with it for a moment. Then they don't even know you've been paying. I locked my phone and set it face down on the cushion. They're about to find out. I paid my parents' mortgage for 4 years, over $55,000, and they had no idea. Then my father sold the apartment my grandmother left me to fund a $100,000 wedding I wasn't consulted about. I just canceled the payments, and I know exactly what happens. Next, because foreclosure timelines are my job. If you've ever been the family ATM nobody bothers to thank, keep watching. I packed the condo in 2 weekends. Marcus rented a box truck for Cora's china cabinet. We carried it down the stairs ourselves, wrapped in moving blankets, because I wasn't trusting movers with the only piece of furniture my grandmother cared about. Her photo went into tissue paper inside a shoebox. I held on my lap in the truck. Everything else fit into boxes from the liquor store on Church Street. Diane Chambers offered me the spare room above the law office. 2nd floor, 1 window, a radiator that clanked, and a bathroom down the hall that smelled like old paper and floor wax. It's not pretty, Diane said, but it's free and it's legal. 2 things I can personally guarantee. I moved in with a suitcase, a coffee maker, and Cora's photo on the nightstand. Marcus kept the china cabinet at his place. We'd figure out the rest later. Naomi called that Wednesday, excited, breathless. Willa, I need to ask you something. Will you be my maid of honor? My stomach turned. She didn't know. She genuinely, honestly, completely did not know where the money was coming from. She thought Dad had savings. She thought the $100,000 wedding was the fruit of 28 years at Kabari's Textiles. She didn't know it was the fruit of selling her sister's home. I'll be there, Naomi. Is that a yes to maid of honor? I'll be. Is that a yes to maid of honor? I'll be. There. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said I'd be there. A paralegal answer, technically accurate, practically non-committal. Naomi heard what she wanted to hear and started talking about bridesmaid dresses. I held the phone away from my ear and looked at Cora's photo on the nightstand. Ka stared back. Even in the photograph, she looked like a woman who knew exactly what her son was capable of. I did what I should have done 3 years ago. I ran a full title search on 312 Poplar Ridge Drive, Unit 4B, not a quick county records poll on my phone, the full workup, the kind I do for clients who are paying Chambers Inhale $400 an hour, chain of title, recorded instruments, probate filings, lien searches, the whole paper trail of a piece of property from the day it was built to the day I sat down at my desk and typed in the address. It took 40 minutes. Here's what I found. 2005 Cora Delphine Mercer purchases Unit 4B mortgage through Kabari's Federal. 2015 mortgage satisfied. Cora owns it free and clear. 2022 Cora Mercer dies. Last will and testament filed with Kabari's County Probate Court. Relevant provision. I leave the Concord condominium at 312 Poplar Ridge Drive to my granddaughter Willa Mercer. Executive named Glenn Allen Mercer. 2022 to 2025. No deed transfer to Willa Mercer. No transfer at all. Title sits in the estate like a car left running in a parking lot. Glenn snorts as executive had the legal authority to manage estate assets and the fiduciary obligation to distribute them according to the will. He did one. He ignored the other. January 2025. Deed transfer from estate of Cora Mercer to David and Kim Park. Consideration $185,000. Instrument signed by Glenn Allen Mercer, executive. I printed the chain of title 18 pages. I pulled the probate file. I pulled the will. I stapled them together and put them in a manila folder and labeled it Mercer Poplar Ridge in black marker. $185,000. That's what my grandmother's love was worth on the open market. And my father cashed it in for a champagne tower and pays in a $4,500 dress my sister would wear once. I know North Carolina foreclosure law the way most people know their home address. I teach it to the new paralegals Diane hires every September. I have the timeline memorized. Month 1, after a missed payment, late fee assessed. The bank sends a polite letter. Month 2, demand letter less polite. The phrase failure to cure appears. Month 3, the lender files a notice of default with the county. This is the one that matters. Once the NOD is filed, it's public record. Anyone can pull it. And the clock starts running toward foreclosure proceedings. I candled the payments in March. April would be the first missed month. The late fee notice would arrive in early May. Glenn wouldn't notice it. He hadn't opened a piece of bank mail in 4 years. The demand letter would come in early June. Glenn might open it, might not. If he did, he'd panic, call the bank, get told he was 2 months behind, and have no idea how that was possible. The notice of default would be filed in late June or early July. The bank would mail it to 47 Branchview Drive, and the wedding was July 19th. I sat at my desk in the room above Chambers and Hale, and I looked at the calendar on the wall, and I did. Arithmetic that would have made Diane proud. Nod mailing approximately July 14th to 16th. Wedding July 19th, 3 to 5 days apart. I didn't need to do anything dramatic. I didn't need to hire a lawyer, or file a lawsuit, or stand on my parents' porch with a megaphone. I just needed to wait. But I added one move. Glenn ignores bank mail. He won't ignore an envelope with my handwriting on it. I'd pull a certified copy of the NOD from the county recorder's office and mail it myself. Time delivery. A paralegal's version of a wedding gift. Patrice called every week with wedding updates. I let her talk. It was like listening to an audio tour of a museum exhibit paid for with stolen artwork. The florist finalized the arrangements. PE and ranunculus will $8,000, but you should see the mock-ups worth every penny. $8,000. That's roughly 7 months of the mortgage I was paying. We booked the caterer $22,000 for the full sit-down, open bar, dessert station, and a late-night snack table. Can you imagine a late-night snack table? $22,000. That's almost half of what I paid in 4 years. 40% of my $55,000 spent on beef tenderloin and a chocolate fountain. The photographer is $6,000, but she's been published in Southern Bride, so she's worth it. And the venue deposit was $15,000. But honey, wait until you see it. $15,000. That's 16 months of auto pay. 16 months of money quietly keeping my parents' house while my father quietly sold mine. Naomi sent me a photo of her wedding dress. She stood in front of a 3-way mirror in a strapless gown that made her look like a magazine cover. She was beautiful, genuinely beautiful, and genuinely unaware that the dress on her body cost $4,500 of her sister's inheritance. I bought my dress for the wedding at TJ Maxx on a Tuesday afternoon during my lunch break. Navy blue, simple cut, $40 on sale. I'd be the plainest person at a $100,000 party. That felt right. Diane saw it hanging on the back of my office door. Nice dress. You sure you want to go to this thing? I adjusted the hanger. I work in real estate, Diane. I know the value of showing up at a closing. Ray Tatum is 63, retired postal worker, and he's lived next door to my parents on Branchview Drive for 20 years. Ray sees everything from his front porch. He doesn't snoop. He just sits out there with his coffee every morning and watches the street the way a man watches a river patiently, because eventually everything floats by. He came into Chambers and Hale in May for a property line dispute. His neighbor on the other side, not my parents, had built a shed 2 feet over the survey line. Standard case. I handled it. Afterward we had coffee in the break room. Ray stirred his cup and looked at me with the steady gaze of a man who'd spent 30 years delivering mail and reading neighborhoods. I see things from my mailbox, Willa. I see who drops off groceries on your parents' porch Saturday mornings. I see who mows the lawn when your daddy's back is acting up. I see who cleaned out those gutters last fall when it rained for a straight week. He took a sip. And I see who doesn't show up. Your sister's been to their house 3 times in the last year. 3. I counted. I'm a mail carrier. Counting is occupational. I didn't respond. Your mama thinks Naomi hung the moon, but the moon doesn't mow lawns. He set his cup down and folded his arms. Ray Tatum is not a man who gives speeches. He's a man who delivers sentences, the way he delivered mail. 1 at a time, right to the door. Whatever is going on with your family, and I know something's going on, because your daddy's been looking like a man carrying a suitcase full of rocks. You've got people in your corner, Willa, more than you think. I thanked him. He left. I sat with his words for a long time. The moon doesn't mow lawns. My parents sold the apartment my grandmother left me, $185,000, and used the money to throw a $100,000 wedding for my sister. Meanwhile, they've been living in a house I've been secretly paying for since 2021. The mortgage payment stopped in March. The notice of default arrives the week of the wedding. I'm a paralegal. I know exactly what comes next. April came and went. Glenn didn't notice. May came with a demand letter from Cabarrus Federal Credit Union. Glenn opened it. The envelope looked different, thicker. The kind of envelope banks send when they stop being polite. Your mortgage payment is 2 months past due. Snorts. Failure to cure the delinquency within 30 days may result in acceleration of the full balance. Glenn called the bank. There must be a mistake. My account's been current. The representative checked the system. Mr. Mercer, your last payment was received in March. We've received nothing since. That's impossible. I've been on auto pay for years. Your auto pay was canceled in March, sir. The recurring payment came from an external account, and that account withdrew the authorization. Glenn hung up, sat in his truck in the Walmart parking lot, opened the bank's website on his phone. His password was still the factory default he'd set 4 years ago, because he'd never once logged in since. Payment history loaded. There it was, $950 every month from an external checking account. A routing number he didn't recognize for 4 years. 48 payments. And then March, the last one. After that, nothing. Glenn stared at the screen. Someone had been paying his mortgage for 4 years, and they stopped the same month Willa confronted him about the condo. He sat in the parking lot for an hour. His hands were shaking. 2 days later, the insurance company sent a cancellation notice. Homeowner's policy lapsed for non-payment. $210 a month. Same external account. Same cancellation date. Glenn snorts. Mercer had been living in a house someone else was keeping, and he'd never bothered to check. He didn't know who was paying, but he knew when they stopped, and he knew why. He called on a Tuesday evening. I was upstairs at Chambers and Hale eating pad thai from a styrofoam container and reading a title abstract for a closing. The next morning, my phone lit up. Dad! I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered, Was it you? No greeting, no small talk. No, hey, sweetheart. Just the question. Was what you? The mortgage. Someone's been paying my mortgage for 4 years. An external account. Auto pay. It stopped in March. Was it you? Silence on my end. Not for effect. I was deciding how much truth to hand him at once. Yes. His breathing changed faster, ragged around the edges. Why? Because I came over in October 2021, and I saw the past due notices on your kitchen counter, and I didn't want you to lose your house. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have said no, and then you would have lost the house. A long pause. I could hear the garage in the background, the faint hum of the chest freezer, a cricket somewhere. He was sitting on the stool again by the workbench under the plaque, and you stopped in March. I stopped in March because of the apartment, because you sold my home to pay for a party, Dad. And I decided I was done paying for yours. His voice cracked on the next sentence. Willa, The wedding is in 5 weeks. If I miss another payment, the bank said. I know what happens when you miss another payment. It's literally my job. Silence. Then quiet. The voice of a man who knows he has no right to ask. Can you start paying again? No. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He hung up. I closed my phone and finished my pad thai. The title abstract was clean. At least someone's property was in order. Glenn told Patrice on a Wednesday night in June. I wasn't there. I got the details later from Naomi, who got them from Patrice, who told the story in fragments over the phone like a woman pulling shrapnel from a wound. He told her everything. The job lost debt, $40,000 across 3 credit cards she never knew existed. The apartment sale, $185,000, $100,000 for the wedding, $40,000 to pay off the credit cards, $45,000 into a savings account Glenn called our safety net, and the mortgage. The fact that their older daughter had been paying it for 4 years, $55,680 from an account they didn't know about, set up by a daughter they'd just stolen from. Patrice sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she peeled potatoes the day I confronted her. The same table where she'd waved her hand and said, "Your father's handling it. He'd handled it all right." "She paid our mortgage," Patrice said. "For 4 years?" "Yes, and you sold her apartment?" "The one Mama left her?" "Yes." I'm told Patrice didn't scream, not at first. She put her head in her hands. The cafeteria worker from Albemarle, who'd sworn her daughters would have everything. She sat there and she understood, maybe for the first time, that everything had a source. And the source was her older daughter's silence. "We have to cancel the wedding. It's 5 weeks away. The deposits are non-refundable. We'd lose $60,000. Then we lose $60,000. Patrice, we can't afford to." That's when she screamed. "We already lost more than that." The neighbors heard it. I'm sure Ray Tatum heard it from his porch. The man carrying a suitcase full of rocks had finally opened it in front of his wife, and the rocks filled the kitchen. They didn't cancel. I knew they wouldn't. The sunk cost fallacy is the most powerful force in family finance. I'd seen it in closings 100 times. People who've already spent $60,000 non-refundable dollars on a thing will spend another $40,000 to finish it rather than walk away and admit the first 60 was a mistake. Invitations sent. 150 RSVPs confirmed. Vendors booked and final payments due. Naomi didn't know the full story yet. Patrice told her there were financial complications and that everything was being handled. The same phrase Glenn used, handling it, was the family euphemism for making it worse. Patrice went through the motions. She confirmed the flower delivery. She approved the seating chart, but the joy was gone. Every line item on the wedding spreadsheet now had a second price tag she couldn't stop reading. Piece $8,000, 9 months of Willa's payments. Champagne Tower $2,400, 3 months of Willa's payments. Glenn made one mortgage payment in May from the $45,000 savings stash, $950, then another in June, $1,900 out of $45,000, but the vendors needed their final payments. The caterer, the band, the photographer, the venue balance. Glenn looked at the savings account and looked at the mortgage and chose the wedding again. He had already chosen the wedding once when he sold my condo. Now he chose it again over his own house. Late June, the notice of default was filed with Cabarrus County. Public record. I checked from my desk at Chambers and Hale. It was there. I drove to the county recorder's office on my lunch break, pulled a certified copy, put it in a plain white envelope, wrote Glenn and Patrice Mercer, 47 Branch View Drive, Canapolis, North Carolina, 28881, in my own handwriting. I mailed it on July 12th, 7 days before the wedding. The rehearsal dinner was July 14th. Small Italian restaurant on Union Street, 30 people, red checkered tablecloths, bread baskets, and house wine. A fraction of the wedding's budget. This was the one affordable thing. I wore the navy dress, sat at the far end of the long table, Marcus beside me, his hand on my knee under the table the way a man holds a steering wheel in a storm. Steady grip, eyes forward. Naomi was radiant. She wore a white sundress. Jordan was nervous in the way grooms are nervous, fumbling his napkin, laughing too loud at every joke. Sweet kid. Patrice smiled. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was performing the way I'd seen witnesses perform in depositions, technically present, emotionally elsewhere. Glenn sat across from her with 2 whiskies on the table before the salad course arrived. His face was gray. Lorraine Whitfield, Jordan's mother, 55, nurse practitioner, at a family clinic in Charlotte, sat down next to me during dessert. She had the kind of face that assessed you before you finished your first sentence. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Whitfield. I don't mean to pry, but I'm a nurse. I can tell a difference between fine and fine. You're the second kind." She said it without judgment, just observation. I gave her a real smile. "The first one in weeks. You're good. I've been watching your parents tonight. Something's off. Your father looks like he's attending a funeral, not a wedding." "Maybe he is." Lorraine didn't push. She buttered a piece of bread and let the silence sit. Nurse practitioners are like paralegals. They notice what's on the chart and what isn't. She filed it away. 2 days later, she'd understand exactly what I meant. Naomi called at 11:00 the night before her wedding. I was in the room above Chambers and Hale, sitting on the narrow bed with Cora's photo on the nightstand and a case file open on my laptop that I wasn't reading. My phone lit up. "Naomi?" She was giddy, nervous, talking fast. "I'm getting married tomorrow, Willa. Can you believe it? Tomorrow I'm going to be somebody's wife. I can believe it. I can't sleep. Jordan's at his mom's. I'm at the hotel, and it's this huge suite with champagne, and I'm just sitting here in my pajamas, eating room service french fries, and I can't stop smiling. She laughed, the laugh of a 24-year-old girl, on the best night of her life. I closed my eyes. Are you happy for me, Willa? I paused. I was happy for her. I love my sister. I love the girl who climbed into my bed during thunderstorms. I love the woman who texted me outfit photos every morning. None of that had changed. What had changed was the price tag on her happiness, and she didn't even know it existed. I'm happy for you, Naomi. I really am. Promise. Promise? A beat of quiet. Then her voice went soft. Willa, I know I don't say it enough, but you're the best sister in the world. You've always been the one who holds everything together. I don't know how. You do it. I held the phone against my ear and looked at Cora's photo. Holds everything together. $55,680 worth of holding everything together, and a condo I would never sleep in again. Get some rest, Naomi. Big day tomorrow. I love you, Willa. I love you too. I hung up. Sat there for a while. Grandma, I said to the photo, I'm sorry about what happens tomorrow, but you would have understood. July 19th, I got dressed in the room above the law office. Navy dress, flat shoes, the pearl earrings Ka gave me for my 18th birthday. Small, understated, real. Cora bought them from a jeweler in downtown Concord with cash from her teacher's pension. She put them in my hand and said, pearls are for women who don't need to prove anything. Marcus picked me up at 8, gray suit, clean-shaved. He drove without the radio on. He didn't ask if I was ready because he already knew the answer, and the question would have been a waste of both our time. Snorts. At a red light on Highway 29, I checked the county records on my phone. USPS tracking for certified mail. Item number ending 7741. Status delivered. Delivered to 47 Branchview Drive, Kannapolis, North Carolina, July 16th. Signed by Glenn Mercer. 3 days ago. He got it. He signed for it. He held the certified copy of his own notice of default in his hands. Read the county seal and the filing date and the words, failure to maintain mortgage obligations. And the wedding was still happening. Glenn chose the wedding for the 3rd time. First, when he sold the apartment. Second, when he used the savings for vendor payments instead of the mortgage. Third, when he signed for a foreclosure notice and still put on a suit and drove his youngest daughter to the country club. Marcus turned into the Kabari's country club entrance. White tents on the lawn. Valet parking. A string quartet tuning up near the ceremony arch. White roses and greenery twisted around a wooden frame. 150 chairs arranged in rows on grass that look like carpet. A $100,000 party paid for with my grandmother's condo. Ready? Marcus asked. A paralegal is always ready for closing day. The ceremony was beautiful. I can say that honestly, whatever came next doesn't change the fact that my sister got married on a perfect July afternoon under a Carolina blue sky, and it was beautiful. Naomi walked down the aisle on Glenn's arm. The $4,500 dress caught the light. Her veil trailed behind her on the grass. Jordan stood at the altar crying before she was halfway there. 150 people stood and turned and smiled and did that collective inhale a crowd does when a bride appears. Glenn delivered Naomi to Jordan and stepped back. His suit was dark and his tie was perfect and his forehead was damp, not from the July heat. Patrice was in the front row. She cried hard, both hands over her mouth. To anyone else, it looked like a mother overwhelmed by joy. I was sitting in the 3rd row with Marcus, and I could see it wasn't all joy. There was something underneath, a tremor in her shoulders, a twist in her face between sobs. Guilt looks like crying at a wedding. They're almost identical. You have to know what you're looking for. The minister said the words. Jordan and Naomi said the words. Rings exchanged, the kiss, the applause, rice thrown in the air, catching the sunlight like confetti. Naomi and Jordan walked back up the aisle together, grinning, and Naomi caught my eye as she passed the 3rd row and blew me a kiss. I caught it, held my hand to my heart, because I love my sister. That was never the question. The question was always, who paid for the aisle she walked down, and who would pay for the answer? Marcus took my hand. We followed the crowd toward the ballroom. The ceremony was over. Closing was about to begin. The ballroom at Kabari's Country Club could have been a magazine spread, crystal centerpieces on every table, white tablecloths, a champagne tower, 6 tiers of coupe glasses stacked in a pyramid near the entrance, gold, champagne cascading from the top like liquid money. A 7-piece band playing jazz standards on a small stage in the corner. Open bar with a chalkboard menu listing craft cocktails with names like the Whitfield Waltz and Naomi's Nightcap. 150 guests, filling tables that each had a calligraphed seating card and a favor bag tied with ribbon. The math ran through my head involuntarily. I couldn't stop it any more than I could stop breathing. Open bar $6,000 minimum. That's 6 months of my parents' mortgage. Centerpieces $4,000. That's 4 months. The band $5,000. Favors, rentals, linens, another $8,000 at least. Every object in this room was denominated in months of secret payments I made to keep my cated parents housed while my father sold my house. Glenn worked the room. He shook hands. He slapped backs. He smiled wide. But his eyes were wrong, too open, too bright, darting from face to face without settling. The eyes of a man who signed for a foreclosure notice 3 days ago and was standing in a ballroom his daughter's stolen apartment paid for, trying to pretend the ground wasn't moving. Patrice moved with him, quieter, watchful. Every time I shifted in my chair, Patrice's head turned. She was tracking me the way a defendant tracks the prosecutor during jury selection. She knew the case. She didn't know the verdict. Toast time. The band finished a song. The lead singer handed the microphone to the father of the bride. Glenn stood up, buttoned his jacket, cleared his throat. The room went quiet. Glenn held the microphone in one hand and a champagne glass in the other. He started with the standard material. Naomi as a little girl. Jordan asking for his blessing. How proud he and Patrice were. The crowd laughed at the right moments. Glenn was good at this. He had been performing confidence his whole life. Tonight was just the biggest stage. Then he went off script. He lowered his voice. Got serious. Patrice and I would do anything for our girls. Anything. We've sacrificed. We've worked hard. We've made tough decisions. And this wedding, this beautiful, perfect wedding is proof of that. This is the best wedding gift we ever gave. He raised his glass. The room raised theirs. Applause. Glasses clinked. 150 people toasting a father's generosity with champagne that cost $12 a glass. I was sitting at table 7. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't clap. I looked at my father across the room, and he looked at me. Snorts, for 2 seconds. There was nothing between us except $100,000 of my grandmother's condo and 4 years of payments he never knew about. He looked away first. After the toast, he walked the room, accepting compliments, shaking hands. Patrice followed. They made their way to table 7. Glenn leaned down. Patrice stood behind him, holding a champagne glass she hadn't touched. Willa, I know things are complicated, Glenn said, his voice low, meant for our table only. But this is Naomi's day. Let's just get through tonight. I looked at my father. I used my deposition voice, level measured, the voice I use when I'm reading a recorded statement into evidence. I heard your toast statement into evidence. I heard your toast at best wedding gift ever. That's what you called it. His smile died on his face. You gave Naomi a beautiful gift, and I gave you one too. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, set it down. Check. Your mailbox. Glenn's face went the color of the tablecloth. White, flat, drained of everything except understanding. Patrice's champagne glass trembled. She grabbed Glenn's arm and pulled him toward the hallway. The carpeted corridor between the ballroom and the restrooms where the noise dimmed and the light turned yellow. I stayed seated. Marcus put his hand on mine. We watched through the open doors as Glenn and Patrice stood in the hallway whispering, then not whispering. Naomi noticed. She'd been dancing with Jordan, laughing. The skirt of the $4,500 dress swirling. And she stopped. She saw her parents. She walked toward them. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Glenn couldn't speak. His back was against the wall and his mouth was moving, but nothing was coming out. Patrice was crying. Not wedding crying, ugly crying, the kind that strips the makeup and the performance and the 35 years of my daughters will have everything, and leaves just a woman from Albemarle who got it wrong. Mom, tell me what is happening. Patrice said it fast, the way you rip off a bandage. Your father sold Willa's apartment, Grandma Carora's condo. He sold it to pay for this wedding. The hallway went quiet. Naomi looked down at her dress. The roses on the tables, the champagne tower visible through the ballroom door. All of it suddenly repriced. What? No. You said you had savings. You said there were no savings. Naomi. Guests near the ballroom entrance were starting to notice. Lorraine Whitfield stood from her table. I got up from table 7 and walked to the hallway. Calm navy dress, Cora's earrings. Naomi turned to me. Is it true? Yes. Dad sold the condo Grandma left me in her will. He never transferred the deed, so legally he could sell it as executive. He used the money for this. I gestured at the ballroom behind me. The roses, the band, the champagne. I would never have wanted this, Willa. You know that. I know. But you never asked where the money came from either. Glenn pushed off the wall. He was trying to gather himself, trying to find the version of Glenn Mercer who gave toasts and shook hands and said, "We're covered." He couldn't find that man. Willa, this your sister's wedding. Can we please talk about this tomorrow? We can talk about it now because there's something else you didn't know. I looked at him, calm as a closing table. Voice, flat, no tremor, no tears, just the facts. Presented in order the way I present a chain of title to a client. I paid your mortgage for 4 years, Dad. $950 a month plus $210 for the homeowner's insurance. 55 cents, $680. I started in October 2021 when I found the past due notices on your kitchen counter. I stopped in March, the same week I found out you sold my apartment. Patrice's hand went to her mouth. $55,000. And the notice of default that arrived at your house 3 days ago. That's what happened when the person who's been secretly keeping your house stops paying because you took hers. Lorraine Whitfield was standing at the edge of the hallway. She'd heard enough. She looked from Glenn to the ballroom, the crystal centerpieces, the champagne tower, the band playing a Sinatra cover to a room that didn't know the floor was falling. And she said it plain. You sold your daughter's apartment to pay for this, and she was the one paying your mortgage. Glenn sat down on the hallway bench. Not by choice. His legs gave out the way. A man's legs give out when last lie holding him up gets pulled away. Patrice turned to me, mascara on her cheeks. Why didn't you tell us you were paying? My tone didn't change. Why didn't you tell me you were selling my home? The band played on. Guests danced. Most of them didn't know. But the people in this hallway, Naomi, Jordan, Glenn, Patrice, Lorraine, Marcus, standing behind me, they knew everything. I didn't stop helping because I stopped caring. I said, I stopped because you taught me that what I gave didn't count. So I stopped giving. I turned to Naomi. She was standing between Jordan and Lorraine, the veil pushed back from her face, her mascara, intact, because she hadn't started crying yet. She was still in shock. The information was too big for the hallway and the dress and the champagne tower behind her. She was 24 years old and she'd just found out her wedding was built on her sister's stolen home and her parents' lies and $55,000 of invisible love she'd never been told about. This is your wedding day. I said it should stay yours. Go back in there, dance with your husband, cut the cake, be happy. How can I be happy knowing? Because none of this is your fault, Naomi. You didn't know. But now you do, and what you do with it matters more than what happened before. She was crying now. Jordan had his arm around her shoulders. Lorraine had her hand on Naomi's back, the steady hand of a nurse, practitioner who'd seen worse than this, but understood that worse doesn't make this small. I'm going to make this right, Willa. You don't have to make anything right tonight. Tonight you got married. That's enough. I took Marcus's hand. We walked down the hallway toward the front entrance of the country club, past the coat check, past the guest book on the pedestal, past the framed photo of Naomi and Jordan that greeted guests when they arrived. The valet brought Marcus's truck. He opened my door. I got in. He walked around, got in, started the engine. We drove out of the parking lot with the windows down. I didn't look back. Behind us, the wedding continued. Naomi danced. Jordan held her. The champagne tower stood. The band played, but the celebration had a crack running through it now, and everyone who mattered knew where it started. Glenn applied for a mortgage modification the following Monday, hardship basis. The bank agreed to a reduced payment plan, $600 a month for 12 months, with the R's rolled into the back end of the loan. He took a night shift at a warehouse distribution center, off I-85 to cover it. 58 years old. Bad backloading trucks from 10 at night until 6:10 in the morning. Nobody sold anyone's apartment this time. He paid with his body because he'd run out of other people's assets to sell. Patrice talked to a lawyer in Charlotte, not Diane. Patrice knew better than that about the apartment sale. The lawyer told her what I already knew. I had a strong case for breach of fiduciary duty. Glen's executive had a legal obligation to distribute the estate assets according to the will. He distributed them to his own bank account instead. Patrice called Glen. Glen called me. I didn't answer. Patrice called Naomi. Naomi called me. I answered. They want to settle? Willa, I know. Will you let them? Tell them to have their lawyer call Diane. Glen signed the settlement papers in August. He owed me $185,000, the full sale price of the condo. They set up a payment plan, monthly installments. Glen would be paying until he was 73. Naomi returned the $4,500 dress to the bridal boutique. They gave her store credit. She sold the crystal centerpieces on Facebook Marketplace, 42 sets at $150 each. Gave the money to me, $6,200 a fraction. But it was the first honest money that had moved in the right direction in this family in years. Diane Chambers made the promotion official the first week of August. The nameplate on my door read, Willa Mercer, Senior Paralegal. Marcus and I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Concord. New place. My name on the lease, his name on the utilities, clean title. I didn't resume the mortgage payments. Glen handled it himself, barely between the warehouse job and the modification plan and the settlement installments, but he handled it. His problem, his house, his payments. Naomi called every Sunday. Not to ask for things, not to talk about wedding photos or thank you cards, just to talk. We were building something new. Not the old version where Naomi floated and I held the ground, but something with both of us standing, eyes open. Patrice sent a card in September. No letter inside, no explanation. No defense, just one line in her careful handwriting. I'm sorry, not enough, but it's a start. I put it in the drawer next to Cora's photo. Glen didn't apologize with words. He showed up at our new apartment on a Saturday morning with his toolbox. Asked if anything needed fixing. Marcus let him in. They fixed a leaky faucet together. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. A man says what he can say with the tools he has. And Glen's tools have always been literal. Cora's china cabinet stood in the dining nook of the new apartment. Still full, still standing like the granddaughter she left it to. Here's what I learned. The people who take from you in silence will always expect you to give in silence until you stop, and the silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. I gave $55,000. I gave 4 years of quiet. I gave my grandmother's condo and my own future. And I never asked for credit or thanks or even acknowledgement. And it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough because what they wanted wasn't my money. They wanted my compliance. The day I stopped complying, the whole structure came down. $185,000, $100,000 wedding, 4 years of secret payments, and 4 words at a country club that changed everything. Check your mailbox. If this story reminded you that the person who gives the most is usually the last one anyone thinks about, share it with someone who needs to hear that. Subscribe to Family Payback Files for more stories like this one.